Hey y'all, it's entry number 13 of this offseason series where we discuss a different player's fantasy value each day as a group. We are another day closer to the start of the 2022 NFL season. Each day we'll drop a name, go through some positives and some concerns of their fantasy profile, and then I'll give my personal opinion at the end. Today's discussion will be on Darren Waller, tight end, Las Vegas Raiders. We'll start with the positives with Darren Waller. Past success. Darren Waller has been one of the best pass-catching tight ends in the league for the last 3 years. In 2019, he put up 90 receptions on 117 targets for 1,145 receiving yards and 3 receiving touchdowns. In 2020, he upped the mark a little bit and put up 107 receptions on 145 targets for 1,196 receiving yards and 9 receiving touchdowns. In 2021, he had a bit of a down year as he put up just 55 receptions on 93 targets for 665 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns in 11 games. He's clearly been one of the best tight ends in the league the last few seasons, with his averages of at least 5 receptions and 60 receiving yards per game in each of the last 3 seasons. By being a proven commodity, it makes Darren Waller a little easier to trust going into 2022. Next up, we gotta talk about his previous red zone usage. During the 2021 season, Darren Waller saw 15 red zone targets, which tied for the 9th most in the NFL among tight ends. And it's important to remember, he played in just 11 games. During the 2020 season, Waller saw 27 red zone targets, which was the most in the league among NFL tight ends according to NFL Savant. By being frequently targeted in the red zone, Waller will have more opportunities to score touchdowns and therefore fantasy points, air yards. According to RotoWire, Darren Waller averaged 83.0 air yards per game, 1.56 air yards per snap, and had 18.7% of his team's air yards during the 2021 season. These were among the best marks in the league for a tight end. Moving on to some of the concerns with Darren Waller's fantasy profile. We gotta start by talking about the added competition. While Darren Waller is likely going to be one of the primary pass-catching options for the Raiders once again in 2022, there's a decent chance that he isn't the number one option in the passing game after the Raiders traded for star wideout Davante Adams. Adams has been one of the best wide receivers in the entire NFL over the last couple of seasons, and already has chemistry with QB Derek Carr from their college days. Adding more pass-catching competition means that Waller will likely see a dip in volume targets, which will put more pressure on him to improve his efficiency in order to put up the fantasy numbers we've come accustomed to from Waller over the past couple of seasons. The next concern I have with Darren Waller's fantasy profile is the new offense. The Las Vegas Raiders will have a new coaching staff in 2022 and therefore a new offense. The team's new offensive play caller will be head coach Josh McDaniels, who has varied his team's tight end usage throughout his career. Considering John Gruden and Greg Olson's offense heavily featured Darren Waller in the past, it's likely that the change to the offense results in a slight decline in target share for Darren Waller in 2022, especially with Davante Adams now on the roster. The third concern I have with Darren Waller's fantasy profile is the sudden drop in yards after the catch in 2021. Darren Waller had 570 yards after the catch in 2019 and 572 yards after the catch in 2020. But in 2021, he had just 242 yards after the catch, according to Pro Football Reference. Will he bounce back in this area? Or are his 2021 numbers in this category what we should expect going forward? Some additional thoughts on Darren Waller. During the 2021 season, in total fantasy points, Darren Waller finished as the TE18 in standard with 78.5 total fantasy points, or 7.1 fantasy points per game, TE18 in half PPR formats with 106 total points, 9.6 fantasy points per game, and TE17 in full PPR formats with 133.5 total points and 12.1 fantasy points per game. During the 2020 season, in total fantasy points, Darren Waller finished as the TE2 in standard with 171.6 total points or 10.7 fantasy points per game. TE2 in half PPR formats with 225.1 total points, 14.1 fantasy points per game, and TE2 in full PPR formats with 278.6 total points and 17.4 fantasy points per game. During the 2021 season, in half PPR formats, Darren Waller had 3 out of 11 games with 0 to 5 fantasy points, 4 out of 11 games with 5 to 10 fantasy points, 2 out of 11 games with 10 to 15 fantasy points, 1 out of 11 games with 15 to 20 fantasy points, and 1 out of 11 games with over 20 fantasy points during the 2021 season, according to fantasy data. Darren Waller dealt with multiple ankle sprains and an IT band strain during the 2021 season, according to Player Profiler. Personal opinion: Darren Waller is currently going off the board as TE4, about pick 45 overall on ESPN, and TE5, about pick 46 overall on Yahoo. It seems he's going in the range for a tight end where the line begins to blur a bit between the clear-cut elite fantasy tight ends and the tight end dead zone. He dealt with a variety of injuries last year that may have impacted his play and suggest he's in line for a bounce-back season. But at the same time, he is getting older. He will be 30 years old in September, and he may not get quite the same number of opportunities that he's seen in the past with the new coaching staff and Devontae Adams now in the mix. I'm on the fence with him a little bit. I will probably grab him in a few leagues if I get a bit unlucky and Travis Kelce, Kyle Pitts, Mark Andrews, and George Kittle are already gone, because Darren Waller has shown that upside to be elite, particularly in full PPR formats. And I really don't like the idea of having a subpar fantasy tight end. I'm not necessarily banging the drum to draft Waller at his current ADP, but he is a decent value. For each of these entries, we will highlight a charitable cause or organization. Today, with Darren Waller's profile, we will highlight 2 organizations that he has shown support for in the past. The first is the Darren Waller Foundation, which equips youth to avoid and overcome addiction to drugs and alcohol, and support youth and their families during their recovery and treatment journey, according to their website. The second organization we will highlight is Darren Waller's My Cause, My Cleats from 2021, which was for Shine a Light, Freedom House, Sober Living, Las Vegas. Here are the links for those organizations below. And that's it for today's entry. If you have a player that you'd like to see covered in the video format of the A Player a Day series, drop a comment below.